The Fortress of the Heart. A story of war attention. What you are about to read might change the way you view love and betrayal. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story of war. The fulminating beginning. The first thing Caroline Hayes noticed wasn't her husband's hand on the model's wrist, nor the infectious laughter that once belonged to her. It was the way the maitre d' lowered his gaze when he saw her, like pain, like a warning. The chandelier bathed the room in an amber glow that should have been romantic, but Caroline's baby kicked, as if saying, "Run!" Ethan leaned in, the model's glossy mouth parted, and the flash of a cell phone camera hurt. Caroline didn't make a scene. She folded the sonogram picture into her palm. She turned and walked out into a January night that would change every name she answered to. On paper, Caroline and Ethan made sense. He was Ethan Sterling, founder and CEO of Horizon Bio, a Charleston biotech firm whose stock price soared every time he gave a keynote in an impeccable Navy suit. She was an operations manager at an NGO that adapted equipment for stroke survivors. Their dinners were flawless, their tables Pinterest perfect, and their arguments centered mostly on the calendar. "You're late," Caroline said the week before the restaurant incident. The windows of their penthouse reflected the Kiowa Island shoreline, cyclists passing their floor-to-ceiling glass wall like quick thoughts. Ethan set his briefcase down too carefully. "Merger schedules are brutal. You said we'd go over the birth plan together." He kissed her forehead. "Email me the document. I want to make sure we're covered if anything complicated happens." Caroline corrected him, soft but firm. "Not covered. Present." He gave her a tired smile. "Present, right?" His phone vibrated. He looked at it as if it were a person who needed him more. Caroline didn't doubt he loved her. She doubted if he remembered how to show it, without treating love like a meeting he could postpone until Friday. She was 32, 6 months pregnant, and always calculated how much to ask for before being labeled demanding. After a complicated miscarriage 2 years earlier, she learned to say, "What time works for you to tell me how you feel?" When her friend Lauren, a lawyer with a penchant for blunt truth, stopped by with a bag of lemon scones, Caroline let her in and sank onto the sofa. "You look like last season's sofa cushion," Lauren said. Still useful, but low on shape. "Charming. What's wrong?" Caroline held the scone like something fragile. "He keeps saying everything is temporary, but I'm starting to think the parts that feel temporary are me." Lauren's eyes softened. "Is there someone else?" "No." Caroline let the word hang, thin and hopeful. "No, I don't think so. He's in love with the company. That's all." "Then say what you need," Lauren said. "Preferably when he's not trying to redesign the healthcare sector in a single email." Caroline pressed her hand to her belly, feeling a small shift under her palm, a tide change no one else could feel. "I'll try tonight." He said he'd be home by 9. At 11, when she turned off the lamp, Charleston glowed outside like a promise she no longer trusted. Beautiful, distant, loud. Ethan arrived at 12:30, the smell of rain and hotel bar clinging to his suit. She pretended to be asleep and wondered when pretending became their shared language. The next morning, she found a reservation confirmation on the counter. The Esplendor, Friday at 7. A glossy note in Ethan's tight handwriting. "Date night, just us." She put down her coffee and exhaled. She believed in second chances as she believed in prenatal vitamins. Daily, faithfully, even if some days they tasted like chalk. The click of betrayal. The Esplendor was all subdued elegance and flattering light. Couples leaned into one another, as if the room were made of secrets. When the hostess asked her name, Caroline lifted her chin. "Hayes." She was a little early. "Of course," the hostess said, her mouth tight with sincerity. "Your table is almost ready." "Almost ready?" felt like a verb just then. Something one could do for a lifetime. A burst of laughter drifted from the bar, and Caroline's eyes moved on their own. Ethan was there in a navy suit that had earned its own section in the family budget. Beside him, a woman with shampoo commercial hair rested her wrist on his hand. Sophia Monroe. The face was familiar. Billboards, a watch campaign, a walk that could rename sidewalks. The betrayal wasn't cinematic. It was brief. A flicker. But there is a frequency of betrayal that hums in the body. The note sounded, and Caroline knew. A cell phone camera clicked. Another. The maitre d' sucked in a breath. Caroline watched 2 seconds in which her marriage silently broke. It wasn't melodramatic. It was ordinary. That made it worse. She turned and walked out. No storm, no broken glass, just the air and the sound of her own shoes on the pavement. She didn't drive home. She drove to the office where she kept the things that mattered most. A small box holding the sonogram and the letter she had started writing 8 weeks earlier, after Ethan missed the anatomy scan. Then it had been theoretical, a drill she promised herself she wouldn't need. Now she sat at her desk. She finished it. She folded it into a white envelope. She addressed it in her clean, neat hand. The escape and the letter. At home, Ethan would find the letter propped against the blue ceramic fruit bowl they bought in Segovia, because it reminded them of a cloudless day. She took what she needed. Prenatal vitamins, leggings, the sweater that made strangers say, "That color looks great on you." She scanned the nursery, the paint sample card still taped to the wall. Iced mint, silver moon, soft wheat. She locked the door and left the key under the terracotta pot they used for basil. The ferry to Beaufort was slow and forgiving, its rhythm ancient, reliable. Caroline stood at the railing, the cold cutting her face, and watched the city bleed into the fog. Somewhere, a notification pinged. She silenced her phone. "First time on the coast?" asked a woman with a rain slicker, her braided hair gray and practical. "You're either running or seeking adventure. People don't come for the middle ground." "I'm running," Caroline said. "Good choice," the woman said, and handed her a thermos mug. "I'm Pilar. You look like someone who needs hot tea and 3 days without cell service." Pilar scribbled an address on a grocery receipt. "I rent a small cottage month to month. No frills. Quiet. In the morning you can hear the birds making up their minds." Caroline wanted quiet. She wanted birds making small, certain decisions. 2 hours later, she dropped her bag onto a braided rug in a room with low ceilings, white curtains, and a sofa that had the good manners to sag politely. She plugged her phone into an outlet and watched the screen fill with messages. She didn't open them. She lay down, sleeping on her side as her midwife recommended, and clutched the sonogram picture to her heart. The scorned king and the queen mother. Back in Charleston, Ethan read the letter 3 times. Then he sat on the kitchen floor like a piece of furniture. His hands shook in a way the boardroom never allowed. "Ethan, I saw you tonight at the Esplendor. There were cameras. You held her hand as if trying to keep a little bird from escaping. I won't yell. I won't break the fine china. But I won't stay here as a sunbeam nailed to a wall. I'm taking space. The baby and I are safe. When you are ready to talk without managing me, without managing the narrative, call Lauren. She'll know how to contact me if I want to be contacted. Please don't look for me to fix your damage. Look for me when you remember how to show up." Ethan called. He texted. He video called. The ringing piled up into a chorus of unmet needs. He dialed Lauren. She didn't answer either. He knew the restaurant would hit the gossip blogs by morning. He also knew the worst of this wasn't public. It was private. The look he couldn't see, the way Caroline had stood up, or fallen, or flown. He closed his eyes. The reflection of the chandelier still trembled in his mind. Ethan's mother, Victoria Sterling, had the calm that only comes from never questioning if she will be obeyed. She sat at the breakfast bar in a white winter coat. A small pearl simulated an apology necklace she would never give. "The optics are manageable," she said, stirring a spoon in an empty cup. "My wife is gone," Ethan said. "She's 6 months pregnant, and she's gone." "You mean she hasn't answered the phone for 12 hours? He exhaled, a sound like a door slamming shut. "I don't have time for your definitions. You always have time for mine." Victoria looked at his tie. "Straighten up. You're on camera at 10. We will focus on the language of privacy. Demand respect for your family. Express regret for the speculation, and let it go." "I kissed someone who wasn't my wife," he said, tasting the words as if they belonged to someone else. "You were seen flirting with a model," she countered smoothly. "It happened in a public place. It's done. What we do now is set the frame before anyone else does." She tapped her phone. A prepared statement flashed on the screen. "Read this, then get dressed." Ethan wanted to throw the phone, or throw himself, into a nearby river. The boy inside him, the one who built houses out of shoeboxes, knew it wouldn't serve. Breaking things didn't fix anything. He dialed a number no publicist knew. "Lauren, Caroline is safe. She asked me to gatekeep her door. I need to see her. You need to take responsibility, without her safety being about you," Lauren said. "For once, be sorry. Tell her that when she's ready." The fallout and the revelation. The news cycle did its job. It created a narrative. The photos. A grainy and amber-lit kiss. The headlines. Biotech king seen with model Sophia Monroe at a splendor. Where is his pregnant wife? The opinions, louder than the truth, softer than the pain. Ethan endured a brief statement on camera. "My marriage is private," he said. "My focus is on my family." His mother's eyes approved. The board's emails approved. The stock price shrugged and carried on. At 10 that night, Ethan sat on the edge of a bed that looked like it belonged to someone efficient. He scrolled through Sophia's Instagram. She hadn't posted anything. He texted her. "We need to talk," Sophia replied. "Meet me where we met." Noon tomorrow. The rooftop garden of the Horizon Bio building was meant to soften the urban landscape. It made him feel small. Sophia arrived in a beige coat. No entourage. No sunglasses. Up close, she looked less like an advertisement and more like a person who had been carefully crying. "There's no part where I explain why I did an ugly thing. Try." Sophia studied the skyline. "Your mother?" "She approached me after a campaign. She knows everyone. Said Horizon Bio was the future, that you couldn't afford to look boring before the FDA announcement. She offered a contract, 2 or 3 public dates, strategic visibility, the story that you're vibrant, irresistible." Her words, not mine. Ethan felt the familiar nausea of corporate logic, disguised as concern. "She told you to kiss me." "No," Sophia said. "She said you'd probably do it yourself eventually." Sophia swallowed. "At first I said no. Then my brother's leukemia got worse. Your mother's people covered an experimental drug that insurance wouldn't. She said I wasn't selling myself. I was buying Manuel time." Finally, she looked him in the eye. "I'm not proud of any of this, but tell me if you've never used money to make something you wanted easier." The silence broke between them. He had. He did. He hated the mirror she held up. "Does Caroline know?" "I tried to contact her," Sophia said. "She blocked me. Lauren told me to leave her alone." "Do you have proof?" he asked. "Contracts? Messages?" Sophia nodded. The coat crinkled. "I kept everything." He imagined walking into his mother's house and dropping a stack of printouts onto her marble counter. He imagined their arguments, surgical, practiced, drawing blood without raising their voices. He imagined Caroline as something more than a variable he could address. I need to find my wife, he said, surprising himself by using the present tense like a vow. Sophia looked both relieved and shattered. Find her and tell her I'm sorry. Tell her the child. She hesitated. Your baby. I hope that... Sophia shook her head. Forget it. I can't hope for anything. You can be human, Ethan said quietly. She gave a half laugh. That's not what we were hired for. The architecture of healing. Caroline's days in the small coastal town began the same way. Listening to a silence that belonged to a place that didn't know her. The cottage had a stove, older than her marriage, and a kettle that made small, encouraging noises. She connected to a local midwife's website. The clinic was 2 blocks away, tucked between a bakery and a bookstore, whose owner watched her as if she were a page that had torn itself from a novel. The midwife, Dr. Dieter Elisa Vega, was one of those women who could knit calm into every appointment. We'll set weekly prenatal checks for now, she said, her hands warm around Caroline's wrist. You're carrying the weight of a move, dear. That counts. I haven't moved, Caroline said, surprised by the defensiveness. I left. Leaving is the beginning of a move, Dr. Vega replied. You'll move your body, your mind, your expectations. It will be work. We'll take it slowly. Take it. Pilar, owner of the cottage and the opinionated bookstore, called one afternoon with a bag of clementines and a visit that felt like a rescue. I've been a wife twice and a mother once, Pilar said. The wife part? I can tell you stories. The mother part? I can't say anything that matters more than the first time you meet your child. Caroline wept because the truth of it dug into her bones. At night, she opened a new notebook. She made lists. Birth plan, real. Birth plan, what I tell people. Money I actually have. Lawyer notes. Lauren had answered her call with the sigh of someone who had been waiting at the other end of a thin rope. I can get you a legal separation with temporary support, Lauren said. We can discuss the prenuptial agreement. I know you signed it. I also know that document was built by a man who thought love was a risk to be managed. I don't want to fight, Caroline said, wanting to mean she didn't want to fight alone. You won't, Lauren said. But Caroline, the press will move on in 2 days. Your mother-in-law won't. Victoria wields power the way I wield subpoenas. She'll try to intimidate you. She'll be careful. Always careful. I've seen the NDAs with her perfume still on them. Do you think Ethan knew? Caroline asked. I think he forgot the difference between control and love. That doesn't mean he can't learn it, Lauren said. But learning is a verb. The documents and the showdown. Sophia's apartment was the kind that made minimalism look like contrition. She lay on the sofa and pressed a cold cloth to her eyes. Her brother Manuel slept in the second room, his breathing a strained argument with his lungs. Sophia learned early that grace often arrived as a bill. She gathered the documents like a penitent. The contract with Victoria's consulting firm. The emails filled with pearly circumlocution. The text message that looked like a threat and a gift. Play nicely, and everyone wins. Sophia was 14 when she learned that everyone sometimes meant them. She saved it to a USB drive and wrote a letter with the kind of care that made her hand ache. Caroline, I owe you none of what you want from me and everything you deserve of the truth. I was hired, coerced by Victoria Sterling, to make your husband look glamorous. I took the money because my brother is sick, and because I didn't think of you as a person, just a variable. That's my fault. Here are contracts, texts, emails. I am not absolved, but I am done being useful to someone else's calculus. Do with this what brings you peace. Sophia found Lauren's office address on the NGO's website. She FedExed the package for morning delivery. Then she called Ethan, because old patterns still tugged. I sent documentation to Caroline. She needs to know. He exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath for a week. Thank you. Can you still be a good father? Sophia said. Can you still be a better man than Victoria raised you to be?" He laughed, and didn't want to. "Raised? You were raised like a relic," Sophia said. "Polished, displayed, protected from failure, until failure grew teeth." Manuel coughed, a thin, frightening sound. Sophia hung up unceremoniously. Ethan looked at the screen. Call ended. He whispered thank you into his empty kitchen, as if the word could travel somewhere without the courage to carry it. The reckoning. Ethan arrived at his mother's house in a storm that took itself seriously. Victoria's house dominated the waterfront like a judgment. The walls held the heavy silence of expensive art. "Is this an ambush?" Victoria asked as he entered her study. "It's a reckoning," he said, and dropped the printed emails onto her mahogany desk. She glanced through them, her eyes as cold as a winter window. "You partnered with a cultural figure to enhance the brand story. You paid a woman to be seen with your married son. You were complicit," Victoria said softly, rationally, if not legally. "Tell me you didn't enjoy being wanted." He wanted to punch the desk, to bruise the wood with his denial. Instead, he breathed. "I enjoyed forgetting that I built a life where love is a calendar invite. I enjoyed forgetting things I shouldn't have forgotten. Does this end now?" Victoria leaned back, a raised eyebrow like a curtain. "Do you think Caroline will forgive you because you found a villain?" "I think I will become a man worthy of forgiveness," he said. Victoria's smile was surgical. "The court of public opinion will move on by Tuesday. The court of family won't. Caroline will cost you focus. Focus is money. Money is medicine for people who rely on your company's drugs. You want to be a hero? Be the hero in the right story. I want to be a father who doesn't text his daughter on her graduation because he's on a plane to Davos," Ethan said, surprising himself with the verb tense. "Daughter." The word lit up a hallway in his mind. Victoria's eyes flickered once. "Daughter? I don't know," she said. "I'll know when the time comes." She stood. "I will retire from daily operations for a quarter. I will take the consequences from the board. I will pay the fine for breaching your little spectacle. I am done outsourcing my soul." "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low with a mother's curse, disguised as a blessing. "I regret missing the anatomy scan," he said. "I regret teaching Caroline she had to manage me like a crisis. I regret believing love is PR. That's enough regret for one lifetime." He left, and for the first time since the restaurant, he cried as if the rain had claimed his face. He called Lauren. "Please," he said, "tell her I want to meet. Anywhere she feels safe. No pressure. I'll leave if she looks at the door." Lauren hesitated. "I'll ask, but you need to know something. It won't be a forgiveness meeting. It might be a boundaries meeting." "Good," he said. "I finally learned the value of a boundary." The boundary meeting. They met at the bookstore, because stories can sometimes translate languages. People forget they speak. Caroline sat at a small table by the window. The rain wrote a letter on the glass. She wore a gray sweater, her hair pulled back, just as it was the night they picked out the paint samples for the nursery. Ethan approached without theatrics. He took off his coat like a man removing armor. "Thank you for—" he started. "Sit," she said. Her voice was soft, which was worse than if it had been hard. He sat. For a moment, they only looked at each other. His face was thinner. His eyes held a firmness she didn't remember. She had found a different kind of strength, the kind you don't get from winning. "Why?" she finally asked. "The short version is that I built a life where wanting felt dangerous. So I wanted small, pre-approved things until I confused relief with love. The long version involves my mother and a contract and my own laziness in the face of temptation." He looked at his hands. "I betrayed you, not just with a kiss, with months of forgetting you're not a variable in my life." Caroline nodded slowly. "I got Sophia's package. I didn't know she sent it until later. I confronted my mother. I'm retiring from daily operations at Horizon Bio." Her eyebrows lifted. That's not a gesture to buy me back. That's your life. It's a start. For me. And for me? She asked. That's not mine to declare. She watched him as if he were simultaneously a stranger and a person she used to love. I made a list, she said, pulling a folded paper from her notebook. Boundaries. You will see the baby when we set schedules. No surprise visits. No PR about our child. You will not allow your mother near me without my consent. Yes, he said. You will attend therapy, not just couples. Personal, with a therapist who doesn't care about your boring resume. Yes, and you will anonymously donate to the research fund that saved Sophia's brother. No plaque, no press. He swallowed a sound that might have been pride trying to rebrand itself. Yes, and if you ever kiss anyone but me again, I don't want a letter. I want a notarized signature on divorce papers and silence. He looked at her. Yes. It was the easiest yes he'd said in months. They talked, slowly and civilly. They made a schedule like divorced people, compassionate and precise. When they stood to leave, Caroline pressed her hand to her belly and winced. He started, panic a live thing in his throat. Just a Braxton Hicks contraction, she said, her breath relaxing. Practice contractions, the body rehearsing. Good, he said. Practice is good, she almost smiled. Not always. He opened the door for her. She walked through without looking back. He didn't follow. Progress, it turns out, can be as quiet as someone letting someone else go first. The birth of Anya. The birth began at 3:24 a.m., the hour when even the bravest thoughts feel weak. Caroline called Dr. Vega, then Lauren. They drove to the hospital in a Subaru that smelled of books and lemon gum. Pilar followed in a noisy van with a thermos of broth, because she believed in broth, the way teenagers believe in forever. The contractions were courteous at first. Then they came like decisions that couldn't be postponed until Friday. Caroline breathed the way she had learned. When the nurse asked if there was a father to call, Caroline looked at the ceiling where someone had mercifully painted clouds. Lauren looked at her. Do you want him? Caroline hesitated through one contraction and half a memory. Yes. Lauren texted Ethan a single line. It's time. She said yes. He drove as if the police were chasing his old life. He scrubbed his hands like penance. He asked the nurse where he should stand, and then stood in a place that didn't claim too much. He whispered nonsense encouragement, and then good ones. He watched Caroline labor, and understood for the first time the arrogance of imagining he was the center of any room. You've had a good day. A perfect wish at the wrong time. His daughter arrived. She was slippery and loud, and more beautiful than anything he had ever taken credit for. Caroline wept in a stupor of relief. Ethan did too, because nothing else made sense. Dr. Vega placed the baby on Caroline's chest, and a sound rose in the room that had nothing to do with monitors. It was the sound of a story choosing its next chapter. I thought it would be a boy, Ethan said, shaky and amazed. Caroline kissed her daughter's wet head. I thought she would be a girl, she said. Hello, Ethan whispered, marveling that the word could be both new and old. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He counted her fingers as if gratitude were mathematics. They named her Anya, because she felt firm. Ethan stepped away while the nurse checked vitals. In the hallway, he found Lauren. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she said. Do the work, show up. Keep showing up. He nodded. He had already scheduled a therapist, sent an anonymous donation, and drafted a resignation from his mother's advisory circle. These were beginnings, not apologies. He returned to the room, where Anya had opened one eye as if assessing him. Hello, he said. I'll get it wrong a lot, but I'm here. Caroline looked at him. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was doing a mother's silent arithmetic, now solving problems by deciding whom to invite to the table first. "We'll take it slowly," she said. "Yes," he said. "Slow is good. Slow is earned. I'll earn it." The baby hiccuped authoritatively. Caroline laughed. A small, silvery sound in a sterile room with purpose. The final foundation. In spring, the cottage had nettles in the garden, which Pilar insisted meant everything was healthy. Caroline built a life calibrated to the rhythms of a newborn and a woman who once believed love was something you kept silent so it would stay. She returned to her NGO part-time. Ethan rented a small house 10 minutes away, not to stalk, not to make a show, but to be near the life he wanted to belong to. He came for scheduled visits with a diaper bag that actually had diapers, and a baby carrier he had practiced with a bag of flour until the YouTube algorithm cried. He attended therapy and sometimes emerged with red eyes and shaking hands. When Anya turned 6 months old, they painted a small room in Caroline's duplex. Soft Wheat won by 1 vote. They hung a paper moon. Caroline and Ethan stood in the doorway, as tourists in a life they weren't sure they could afford. Caroline reached for his hand, and he didn't grab it. He let the moment breathe. "Thanks for buying the cheap paint," she said. "It's not cheap," he said. "It's modest." He smiled to himself. "I'm learning," she smiled. A real soft smile. "We both are." Outside, the coastal town exhaled the salt of patient things. Inside, Anya gurgled, unimpressed by plots and adults. Caroline kissed her daughter's head and thought of that January night. The chandelier, the maitre d's eyes, the cold air kissing her face. She had walked out of one room and into another. She had left a letter and found a voice. She hadn't forgiven because the story demanded it. She had forgiven where it served the child she loved and the woman she was becoming. And that, finally, was enough. Toàn bộ câu chuyện đã được dịch, mở rộng và kết thúc. Đây là một câu chuyện tuyệt vời về sự tự cứu chuộc và giới hạn cá nhân. Bạn muốn làm gì tiếp theo? Chúng ta có thể bắt đầu một câu chuyện hoàn toàn mới hoặc tạo một đoạn mở đầu ấn tượng cho câu chuyện này. The unsexy work of rebuilding. 1 year later. 1 year later, the rhythm they had built was slow, steady, and entirely theirs. The word they avoided, forgiveness, had been quietly replaced by consistency. Ethan was no longer the high-flying CEO of Horizon Bio. He had fully transitioned out of daily operations, serving only as a limited authority chairman of the board. He had sold his lavish penthouse and bought a simple craftsman-style home in Caroline's neighborhood, setting up a consulting firm that specialized in ethical governance for nonprofits. His days were filled with tasks the old Victor Thorne would have scoffed at, volunteering at the local community garden, showing up exactly 1 minute early for scheduled visits with Anya, and listening, truly listening, to his personal therapist. Caroline's new mission. Caroline, meanwhile, had flourished. Her life was no longer defined by betrayal, but by purpose. She had returned to her NGO, but her focus shifted. She started a new program named the Boundary Project, designed to help partners of high-stress, high-power executives set emotional and logistical limits on their relationships before the structure collapsed. She used her own story, not as a victim, but as a strategic architect. Her main motto, "Love is not an asset to be managed. It's a foundation that requires constant presence." One afternoon, a young woman, a partner of a junior executive at a major bank, sat across from Caroline, distraught about her husband's constant emotional absence. "It sounds like a choice he's making," Caroline said gently. "But you have to decide where your choice begins. I thought I was protecting my love by being quiet and manageable. I wasn't. I was teaching him that my needs were optional." The test of trust. The deepest challenge remained Victoria Sterling, Ethan's mother. She had never accepted the court's decision, viewing Caroline's actions as a hostile corporate takeover of her son. One Saturday, a luxury town car pulled up outside Caroline's duplex. Victoria emerged, impeccably dressed, carrying a huge custom-made toy castle for Anya. She hadn't called. Caroline, holding a 6-month-old Anya, met her on the porch. "Victoria, this isn't a scheduled visit. You need to leave." "I brought a gift for my granddaughter," Victoria said, her voice smooth and reasonable. "I want to see her." "You lost the right to dictate access when you attempted to weaponize the legal system," Caroline stated, her voice firm. "You may send the gift through Ethan, or you may drop it off with my assistant at the NGO. You may not use it as leverage to break the boundaries that protect my daughter. This is not negotiable." Victoria's smile faded. For the first time, she saw not the frightened wife, but the woman who had surgically dismantled her son's public image. She left the castle on the porch and drove away without a word. When Ethan arrived later that day, he saw the castle and the tight line of worry around Caroline's mouth. He didn't ask what happened. He simply picked up the castle, drove it to a local children's shelter, and returned with a receipt. "It's donated," he said, handing her the slip. "I dealt with the boundary." Caroline didn't smile, but she reached out and took his hand. It was the deepest act of trust either of them had allowed in a year. The new vow. They were sitting in the backyard one cool evening, watching Anya try to eat dirt. Ethan spoke, his voice low. "I need to say this, Caroline. I am never going back to that life. I am building something new. But I need to know where I belong." Caroline looked at him. "You belong where you show up, Ethan. I know the rules you set for me," he said. "They are the strongest boundaries I've ever had. But I need to know the rules for us. Do we ever get to stop taking it slowly?" Caroline watched the golden light filter through the leaves. She was no longer afraid of his answer. "We don't need a grand gesture," she said, looking down at the hand he had set between them. "We need a commitment based on the man you are now, not the one you were." She met his eyes. "You can come home, Ethan. But you're moving into my home, my life, my rhythm. You're giving up the right to prioritize a boardroom over a birthday. Are you ready to stop practicing and start living?" Ethan's eyes, clear and earnest, finally held the honesty she had always craved. "I retired from managing the company, Caroline," he said. "I want to spend the rest of my life managing this relationship." It was the most beautiful, most un-CEO-like thing he had ever said. She smiled, a full, warm, earned smile. And with the simple agreement to merge their lives, they took the next small step toward a future built not on wealth or pretense, but on hard-earned, everyday consistency. The quiet triumph of routine. The new rhythm felt less like a strategic plan and more like a gentle, deep breath. Ethan upheld his commitment to live slow with an almost zealous devotion. For a man whose entire identity was built on aggressive efficiency, this was the hardest work he had ever done. He stopped taking calls after 6 p.m. He learned that the perfect temperature for a baby bottle wasn't a numerical value, but something you tested with a drop on your wrist. He mastered the art of the dad bun, a practical, messy hairstyle for men who spend more time crawling on the floor than in boardrooms. The laundry test. One Tuesday evening, Caroline came home from the NGO exhausted. She had spent the day mediating a difficult conflict and felt utterly drained. The laundry basket was overflowing, a physical representation of the domestic chaos she couldn't face. Ethan was in the living room, reading aloud from a picture book to Anya, who was more interested in chewing on the corner of the book than the plot. "I can't," Caroline mumbled, dropping her bag. The laundry." Ethan simply marked his place in the book. "I've got it. You go take a long shower. I'm on level 2. Sorting and folding." He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't ask for praise or recognition. He just did it. Later, When Caroline emerged, the basket was empty. Ethan was neatly folding tiny Anya clothes, diaper covers, onesies, little socks. He was focused, precise, applying the same intense concentration he once used on billion-dollar merger documents. "I found a new KPI," he murmured. Without looking up. "Key performance indicator?" Caroline asked, leaning against the doorway, watching him. "Yeah, the speed at which I can pair matching socks. I'm currently averaging 4.3 seconds per pair. Still working on the algorithm for maximum lint removal." Caroline laughed, a real deep, unmanaged laugh. He hadn't just done the task, he had integrated it into his personality. He was using the tools of his old life to master the requirements of his new one. It wasn't about being fixed. It was about being present. The final showdown with Victoria. The quiet peace was finally disturbed by the last echo of the past, Victoria Sterling. Her lawyer served papers, challenging Ethan's limited chairmanship role at Horizon Bio, claiming his sudden shift to ethical consulting and domestic distraction made him unfit to lead the company's long-term vision. This was Victoria's final, desperate attempt to reclaim control over her son's life and legacy. This time, the fight wasn't about custody or money. It was about who got to define Ethan Sterling. Ethan didn't flinch. He walked into the emergency board meeting not in a bespoke Navy suit, but in the same simple sweater he wore while reading to Anya. He spoke not about profits or market share, but about value. "My mother believed that focus on my family makes me a weak leader," he addressed the board. "I believe it makes me a better one. I left daily operations not because I lacked drive, but because I found a purpose that demands a higher integrity than maximizing shareholder value." He presented the board with an ethical framework he and Caroline had developed for her NGO, detailing how principles like transparency, long-term sustainability, and true care translated into stronger, more resilient organizations. He spoke of the difference between an asset and a liability, and how he had once confused his own wife and child with variables he could manage. The board, many of whom were fathers and mothers themselves, listened. They saw a man who had faced the true cost of his ambition and emerged fundamentally changed. They voted unanimously to uphold his chairmanship and even more strikingly, approved a motion to integrate his ethical framework into their executive training. When Victoria heard the news, she didn't call. She simply sent an email to Ethan's personal address. "You have chosen your side. You are no longer one of us." Ethan read the email, deleted it, and never looked back. The silence from his mother was painful, but it was also the final, most definitive boundary he had set for himself. The vow of belonging. 1 year and 2 months after their first boundaries meeting, Ethan made his final, unprompted move. He sold his small craftsman house and bought the duplex that Caroline had been renting. He didn't upgrade it. He didn't renovate the kitchen. He simply bought the physical space of her security. That evening, he handed her the deed. "It's not a grand gesture," he said, his voice quiet. "It's just the house. I bought it because I want Anya to grow up in a place that has only known your sense of home, not mine. The house is in your name, all yours. The deed says, Caroline Hayes, owner." Caroline looked at the document, then at him. He was standing there, ready for her boundaries, ready for her lists, ready for her justified anger. But there was only peace. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I finally realized what truly belonging feels like," he said, stepping forward to gently place a hand on her pregnant belly, where their second child was now growing. "It doesn't feel like a monument. It feels like matching socks, a shared mortgage, and the quiet understanding that the only thing worth fighting for is right here." She leaned into him, feeling the steady strength of the man who had traded his throne for a laundry basket. He hadn't been fixed. He had been rerouted. And for both of them, the simple, quiet truth of that was the greatest victory of all.